Millionaire is sentenced to pay 896 setpinos to a cleaning lady until a 7-year-old poor girl reveals the shocking truth, leaving everyone moved. Before we dive in, give it a like and share where you're from, and one thing you're grateful for today. The gavel crashed down like thunder in courtroom 7B, and 31-year-old tech mogul Marcus Wellington felt his world shatter into 896 million pieces. Judge Patricia Harrison's voice cut through the stunned silence like a blade through silk, each word falling with the weight of a sledgehammer against Marcus's chest. The court orders Mr. Wellington to pay $896 million in damages to Ms. Sophia Rodriguez and her twin sons, ages 1 year, for emotional distress, lost wages, and punitive damages related to workplace harassment and wrongful termination. Marcus's hands trembled as he gripped the mahogany table, his knuckles white with the strain of holding himself upright. His lawyer, David Chen, whispered urgently in his ear, but the words felt like they were coming from underwater, distorted and meaningless. In the gallery behind him, reporters scribbled furiously while cameras flashed like lightning strikes, each burst of light capturing another moment of his professional destruction. This was supposed to be a simple wrongful termination case. How had it exploded into this financial apocalypse that threatened everything he'd built? Across the aisle, 28-year-old Sophia Rodriguez sat perfectly still, her dark eyes fixed on the judge with an intensity that made Marcus's skin crawl. She wore a simple navy dress that looked expensive despite its understated style, her long black hair pulled back in a neat bun that revealed elegant cheekbones and a graceful neck. Her twins, Michael and Gabriel, dozed peacefully in their designer stroller beside her, oblivious to the courtroom drama that would supposedly secure their future forever. Sophia's lawyer, Amanda Pierce, smiled triumphantly as she organized her papers with the satisfaction of a predator that had just secured its kill. "Mr. Wellington," Judge Harrison continued, her grey eyes stern behind wire-rimmed glasses, "you have 60 days to begin payment arrangements. Ms. Rodriguez has documented extensive evidence of your company's systematic harassment, including recorded conversations and witness testimonies from other employees who corroborate her claims of a hostile work environment." Marcus stood on shaking legs, his 6-foot frame feeling suddenly fragile in his custom-tailored suit. "Your Honor, I maintain my innocence. My company has always operated with the highest ethical standards, and these allegations are completely— Save it for the appeal, Mr. Wellington." The judge's voice was ice, cutting through his protest like a scythe through wheat. "Court is adjourned." As the courtroom erupted into chaos, Marcus caught Sophia's eye across the room. For just a moment, he thought he saw something flicker across her face. Was it guilt, regret, fear? But then Amanda Pierce was at her side, ushering her toward the exit as reporters swarmed like vultures, sensing fresh carrion. Outside the courthouse, Marcus loosened his silk tie and tried to breathe the crisp Seattle air. His empire, Wellington Tech, worth over $2 billion and employing 3,000 people across 5 countries, would survive this blow, but barely. The company he'd built from nothing in his garage, working 18-hour days and surviving on coffee and determination, was now at risk because of one woman's accusations. The irony wasn't lost on him that the same drive and intensity that had made him successful was now being painted as harassment and abuse. "Marcus!" His assistant, Jennifer, pushed through the crowd of reporters and photographers. "The board is in emergency session. Stock prices are plummeting, and we're getting calls from investors demanding explanations." He nodded numbly, watching as Sophia emerged from the courthouse steps. She moved carefully, like someone carrying a secret too heavy for her shoulders, her movements calculated and precise, in a way that seemed almost rehearsed. 6 weeks had passed since the verdict, and Marcus Wellington sat in his penthouse office on the 42nd floor, watching the sunrise paint Seattle's skyline in shades of gold and amber. The Space Needle pierced the morning sky like a silver needle, and Elliott Bay stretched out beyond, dotted with ferries carrying their early morning passengers. The financial transfers had begun, $42 million already paid to Sophia Rodriguez's legal team, each wire transfer feeling like another nail in his professional coffin. His phone buzzed insistently on the mahogany desk that had been his father's before him. David Chen, his lawyer and longtime friend, appeared on the video screen looking haggard, his usually pristine appearance disheveled. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his normally perfect hair was tousled, as if he'd been running his hands through it all night. "Marcus, we need to talk. I've been digging deeper into Sophia's background, and there are some significant inconsistencies that we need to address immediately." Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, hope flickering in his chest for the first time in weeks. "What kind of inconsistencies, David? Please tell me you've found something we can use." "Employment records, for one. She claims to have worked for Wellington Tech for 3 years, but our HR department only has records going back 18 months. I've checked and double-checked. There's no trace of her before that date. And these twins of hers, the birth certificates show some irregularities that my investigator thinks we should examine more closely." Marcus leaned forward, his pulse quickening. "What are you saying, David? Are you telling me this woman might have fabricated parts of her case?" "I'm saying we might need to look at this entire situation from a completely different angle. Can you meet me at my office in an hour? And Marcus, bring your own copies of any personnel files related to Sophia. Something doesn't add up, and I have a feeling we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg." Meanwhile, across town in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in the Capitol Hill district, Sophia Rodriguez paced her small living room like a caged animal. The space was clean but sparse, furnished with pieces that looked like they'd come from second-hand stores and discount retailers. Her twins played with colorful blocks on a blanket spread across the worn carpet, their innocent laughter a stark contrast to the anxiety that radiated from every line of Sophia's body. The morning light streaming through cheap curtains highlighted the stress lines around her eyes and the way her hands shook slightly as she checked her phone for the dozenth time. At 28, she looked older, worn down by circumstances that had spiraled far beyond her control into something dark and dangerous. Her phone rang, and she recognized Amanda Pierce's number immediately, her stomach clenched with dread as she answered. "Sophia, the next payment should arrive this week. $8.2 million. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," Sophia lied, watching Michael try to stack blocks while Gabriel chewed on a toy truck, their identical faces glowing with toddler joy. "The boys are good. They're adapting well. And you're sure about everything we discussed? The timeline, the details, your testimony. Everything has to match perfectly if Wellington's team starts digging deeper. My clients are very particular about consistency." Sophia's stomach clenched tighter. "Amanda, I need to ask you something. What if things have gone too far? What if—" "Sophia." Amanda's voice turned sharp, cutting through Sophia's hesitation like a blade. "We've been over this countless times. You were wronged by that man and his company. The evidence speaks for itself. Don't let doubt creep in now, not when we're so close to complete victory." And after hanging up, Sophia sank onto her worn couch, the weight of what she'd done, what she'd been convinced to do, pressing down on her chest like a physical force. She looked at the twins, their innocent faces completely trusting, and whispered, "I'm so sorry, babies. Mommy has made some terrible mistakes that might hurt everyone." And outside her window, a young girl's laughter drifted up from the playground below, pure and unguarded. 7-year-old Emma Martinez was pushing her little brother on the swings, her long braids flying behind her as she ran with the boundless energy of childhood. Emma lived with her grandmother in the building next door, and Sophia had often watched the child's joy, with something approaching envy. If only life could be that simple again. If only the truth weren't so complicated and dangerous, and if only she could find a way out of the web she'd helped weave. The law offices of Chen and Associates occupied the entire 15th floor of a downtown Seattle high-rise, and this morning they buzzed with quiet intensity as Marcus Wellington studied the documents spread across the mahogany conference table. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating pages of evidence that seemed to shift the entire foundation of his case. David Chen pointed to a series of discrepancies that made Marcus's pulse quicken with the first real hope he'd felt in months. Look at this carefully, Marcus. Sophia's employment application lists her previous address as Portland, Oregon, apartment complex called Riverside Gardens. But when I contacted the management company yesterday, they have absolutely no record of a Sophia Rodriguez ever being a tenant there. Not just missing paperwork, no record at all. Marcus picked up another document, his hands steadier now that he had something concrete to focus on. What about these medical records for the twins, the birth certificates? That's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, disturbing. David pulled out a manila folder thick with papers. The hospital records show she gave birth to twins 13 months ago at Swedish Medical Center. But here's the problem. She was supposedly working full-time at your company during her entire pregnancy, including the final months when she would have been obviously showing. Marcus frowned, processing this information. Someone would have noticed a pregnant employee. My company isn't that large. We all know each other. Exactly. And there's more that doesn't make sense. I hired Jennifer Walsh, one of the best private investigators in the city, to look into Sophia's background. Marcus, Sophia Rodriguez has no credit history beyond 2 years ago. No college records, no previous employment beyond what she's told us, no family connections that we can trace. It's like she appeared out of thin air with a fully formed identity. Marcus felt a mixture of hope and anger building in his chest, hot and urgent. Are you telling me this woman might have fabricated this entire case against me? That she's destroyed my reputation and nearly bankrupted my company based on lies? I'm saying we need to be very careful how we proceed from here. If she has fabricated evidence, she's been extremely thorough about it. But Marcus... David's expression grew serious, his lawyer's instincts clearly troubled. If we're right about this, someone with significant resources and connections helped her create this identity. This isn't amateur hour. This level of deception requires money, contacts, and expertise. Across Seattle, in the small apartment that had become her prison, Sophia was having her own crisis of conscience. The twins were napping in their shared bedroom, and she found herself staring at the legal documents Amanda had given her to review. The more she read, the more the weight of her deception crushed down on her like a physical force. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and dialed a number she hadn't called in months. After several rings that felt like hours, a familiar voice answered, warm and concerned. "Sophia? Mija? Is that you? I've been so worried. You haven't called in so long." "Mama," Sophia whispered in Spanish, tears already flowing freely down her cheeks. "I've done something terrible. I need help, but I don't know if anyone can help me now." Where are you, baby? Tell me what happened. Whatever it is, we can figure it out together." Sophia looked toward the bedroom where the sleeping twins lay, her heart breaking into smaller pieces with each breath. "I can't tell you over the phone. It's too dangerous. But, Mama, I need to ask you something important about my past. Do you remember when I was working in Chicago 3 years ago? That wealthy family I worked for as a nanny. Of course, the family with the 2 little boys. You loved those children like your own. You sent me pictures all the time. Why do you ask about them now?" Sophia closed her eyes, the full weight of her deception finally clear, sharp, and painful as broken glass. "Because, Mama, I think I'm about to lose everything. And this time, I might deserve it." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across her apartment as Sophia made a decision that would change everything. She picked up her phone and began searching for a number she'd hoped never to call again, a number that might be her only chance at redemption. It was time to tell someone the truth, even if it destroyed her completely. 7-year-old Emma Martinez pressed her nose against the cool window of her grandmother's apartment, watching the fancy cars pull up to the building next door. Her breath fogged the glass as she studied the scene below with the intense curiosity that had always marked her as different from other children her age. Her grandmother, Rosa, was folding laundry at the kitchen table and humming an old Spanish lullaby, but Emma's attention was completely fixed on the drama unfolding in the street below. "Abuela, why are there so many people with cameras outside Sophia's building?" They've been there for 3 days now, and they keep taking pictures whenever she comes outside. Rosa Martinez looked up from her folding and joined her granddaughter at the window, her weathered hands gentle on Emma's shoulders. At 68, Rosa had seen enough of life to recognize trouble when it appeared on her doorstep. The reporters and photographers clustering around the neighboring building made her deeply uneasy. "I don't know, mija. But whatever it is, it's not our business to get involved." Emma had been watching Sophia for months now, ever since the young woman had moved in with her twin babies. The woman with the twin babies always looked so sad, even when she was pushing the expensive stroller around the small playground behind their building. Emma had wanted to introduce herself many times, but her grandmother had taught her to be cautious around strangers, especially in their neighborhood, where people came and went like shadows. "She looks scared, Abuela. Really scared. Maybe we should help her. You always taught me that when good people are in trouble, other good people should try to help." Rosa's expression softened as she looked at her granddaughter's earnest face. Emma had been raised by her grandmother since she was 3 years old, after her parents died in a car accident on I-5 during a winter storm. Rosa had taught her that when good people were in trouble, other good people should step forward. But she'd also taught her to be careful, to think before acting. Sometimes, pequeña, people have to solve their own problems. We can pray for her, but some battles are not ours to fight. But Emma wasn't satisfied with that answer. Her 7-year-old sense of justice burned bright and clear, undimmed by the complexities that made adults hesitate. She'd learned early that life could change in an instant, that people you loved could disappear, and that sometimes only action, not prayer, could make a difference. Later that afternoon, while Rosa was taking her daily nap in the bedroom, Emma slipped out of the apartment and made her way to the playground. She'd seen Sophia there every day at exactly 3 o'clock, pushing the twins on the baby swings while looking around nervously as if she expected someone to jump out from behind the trees. Today was no different, except Sophia looked even more upset than usual, her movements jerky and anxious. "Hi," Emma said, approaching slowly with her hands visible, the way her grandmother had taught her to approach frightened animals. "My name is Emma. I live right there in the red brick building." She pointed to her grandmother's window. Sophia looked up, startled, quickly wiping her face with the back of her hand. Her eyes were red from crying, and her makeup was smudged. "Hello, Emma. I'm Sophia. These are Michael and Gabriel." The hesitation in her voice was barely noticeable, but Emma caught it. Emma studied the twins with the intense curiosity of childhood, taking in every detail of their faces, their clothes, their toys. Something nagged at her memory, something important that the adults around her didn't seem to notice or care about. The feeling was like having a word on the tip of her tongue that wouldn't quite come. "They're really cute. How old are they exactly?" 13 months, Sophia answered, but her voice sounded strained, like she was reciting lines from a play she didn't want to be in. Emma tilted her head, processing this information with the mathematical precision that had always impressed her teachers. She was exceptionally good with numbers and details. Her grandmother often said she had an old soul trapped in a young body, remembering everything and understanding more than she should. "Sophia, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure, sweetheart." Emma sat down on the bench next to Sophia, her small hand reaching out to pat the older woman's arm in a gesture of comfort that seemed far too mature for her age. "Are you in trouble? There were lots of people with cameras outside your building today, and you look really scared." Sophia's carefully constructed composure cracked completely, and tears began flowing again. "Yes, Emma, I'm in very big trouble. Bigger than you could imagine." Emma studied Sophia's face with the directness that only children possess. "My abuela says when we're in trouble, the best thing to do is tell the truth, even when it's scary, even when it might hurt." Sophia looked at this wise little girl and felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of the tight bands of fear and deception that had held her prisoner for months. What if the truth might hurt people you care about? What if telling it could make everything worse? Then you tell it gently," Emma said with the simple wisdom of childhood, "but you still tell it, because lies always hurt more than truth in the end." As they sat together in the fading afternoon light, neither of them knew that this conversation would soon change the lives of everyone involved in the case that had captivated the entire city. Marcus Wellington hadn't slept in 3 days, and it showed in every line of his face. The private investigator's latest report lay spread across his kitchen island like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that refused to form a complete picture. His penthouse apartment, usually a sanctuary of minimalist luxury and carefully curated art, now felt like a war room in the battle for his reputation, his fortune, and quite possibly his freedom. Coffee cups in various stages of emptiness littered the granite countertops, and legal documents covered every available surface. The floor-to-ceiling windows that normally showcased Seattle's stunning skyline now felt like barriers, keeping him trapped in his own private hell. David Chen had called an emergency meeting for 8 a.m., but Marcus couldn't wait. At 6:30, he was already dressed in yesterday's wrinkled shirt and heading to his lawyer's office, the investigator's file clutched in his hands like a lifeline that might pull him back from the edge of complete destruction. "You're early," David said when Marcus burst through the office doors, looking haggard and desperate. "But that's good, because what I'm about to show you changes absolutely everything we thought we knew about this case." David led him to the conference room where a new face waited, Detective Sarah Liu from the Seattle Police Department's Fraud Division. She was younger than Marcus had expected, probably in her early 30s, with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she'd seen every kind of deception the human mind could devise. Marcus's stomach dropped as he realized this had moved far beyond a civil lawsuit. "Mr. Wellington, I'm sorry we have to meet under these circumstances, but we've been investigating some serious irregularities in the Rodriguez case. Mr. Chen contacted us yesterday with evidence that suggests this might be more than a civil matter. It might be criminal fraud on a massive scale." Detective Liu opened her laptop and turned the screen toward Marcus. The display showed a complex chart connecting various pieces of evidence, photographs, and timeline elements that made Marcus's head spin. "We've been looking into Sophia Rodriguez's background for the past week, and frankly, the woman who sued you might not exist at all." Marcus sank into the leather chair, overwhelmed by a mixture of relief and anger, so intense it made him dizzy. "What exactly do you mean by that?" "I mean, Sophia Rodriguez, age 28, former employee of Wellington Tech, mother of twin boys, is a completely fabricated identity. The real woman, whoever she actually is, has been living under false documents for at least 2 years, possibly longer." Detective Liu clicked through several screens of evidence. The birth certificates for the twins are forgeries. Very good ones, but forgeries nonetheless. The hospital records have been altered. Her social security number belongs to a woman who died in 2019. Her employment history, her apartment rental agreements, even her driver's license, all of it built on a foundation of lies. Marcus felt the room spinning slightly as the implications hit him. So the pregnancy, the employment history, the harassment claims, all of it, fabricated with incredible attention to detail. But Mr. Wellington, here's what concerns us most about this situation. This level of identity creation requires serious resources, connections, and expertise. Someone with significant means and legal knowledge helped her become Sophia Rodriguez. This wasn't a solo operation. This was orchestrated by professionals. Meanwhile, Sophia was pacing her apartment like a caged animal, her anxiety so intense she could barely breathe. The twins were at her neighbor's apartment. Mrs. Jen from down the hall had offered to babysit, sensing that Sophia needed some space to think and make some important decisions. Amanda Pierce was due to arrive any minute for what Sophia had told her was a routine case review. But Sophia knew this conversation would be anything but routine. When Amanda knocked, Sophia's hands were shaking so badly she could barely turn the doorknob. Amanda Pierce stepped into the apartment looking immaculate as always, her designer suit perfectly pressed, her blonde hair styled in a way that probably cost more than Sophia's monthly rent. "Sophia, you look absolutely terrible. What's wrong? You're not having second thoughts about our arrangement, are you?" Sophia closed the door and turned to face the woman who had promised to save her life, but had instead trapped her in a nightmare. "Amanda, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting or threatening me." Amanda's expression shifted from concern to cold calculation, her blue eyes hardening like ice. "Sophia, we've discussed this before. You're just having pre-trial nerves. It's completely normal and expected." "These aren't pre-trial nerves." Sophia's voice rose for the first time in months, desperation giving her courage. "These children aren't Marcus Wellington's. They never were. And you know it. You've known it from the very beginning." The silence that followed was deafening. Amanda slowly removed her coat and hung it carefully on the back of a chair, her movements deliberate and controlled. When she turned to face Sophia, her expression made Sophia's blood run cold. "Sophia, you're going to sit down right now, take a deep breath, and remember very carefully what happens to people who try to back out of agreements with my clients. The consequences are not pretty." Sophia felt the last of her illusions crumble. "Your clients? I thought I was your client. I thought you were helping me." Amanda's smile was sharp as a knife, cold and predatory. "Oh, my dear naive girl, you were never the client. You were always just the weapon we needed to destroy Marcus Wellington." As the truth of her situation finally became crystal clear, Sophia realized she was trapped in a web far more dangerous and complex than she had ever imagined. And somewhere in the city, a 7-year-old girl named Emma was about to stumble upon the key that would unlock everything. The Seattle Children's Museum was busier than usual for a Tuesday afternoon, filled with the excited voices of children on spring break and the patient murmur of parents trying to keep up with their energetic offspring. Emma Martinez held her grandmother's weathered hand as they walked past the dinosaur exhibit, but her mind was elsewhere, churning through a puzzle that had been bothering her for days. Rosa noticed her granddaughter's unusual quietness immediately. Emma was typically a chatterbox during their museum visits, asking endless questions about everything from the physics of the pendulum exhibit to the eating habits of prehistoric creatures. Today, she seemed lost in thought, her small face creased with concentration. "Abuela, can we sit down for a minute? Can we sit down for... I need to ask you something really important, and I need you to help me remember something." Rosa Martinez looked at her granddaughter with growing concern. Emma had been unusually quiet for the past few days, which wasn't like her at all. The child had always been precocious, asking questions that sometimes made Rosa wonder if Emma had somehow absorbed wisdom beyond her 7 years. "Of course, Mija. What's troubling you so much?" They settled onto a bench near the butterfly garden, where monarch butterflies danced behind glass walls in an eternal spring. Emma swung her legs and gathered her courage, knowing that what she was about to say might sound crazy to adult ears. "Do you remember last year when you were in the hospital for your heart surgery, and I stayed with the Johnson family for 2 weeks? Rosa's expression softened with memory. "Yes, of course, Mrs. Johnson was so kind to take care of you while I recovered. They have those twin boys who are close to your age. Why do you ask, pequeña?" Emma took a deep breath, knowing she had to be very careful about how she explained this. Adults sometimes didn't listen to children when they said important things, dismissing their observations as imagination or confusion. "The Johnson twins, Tommy and Tyler. Do you remember what they looked like?" Rosa nodded slowly, sensing this was leading somewhere significant. "Yes, they were beautiful children. Very distinctive features, those bright blue eyes and dark hair. They looked exactly alike, like mirror images." Emma's voice dropped to a whisper, and she leaned closer to her grandmother. "Abuela, Sophia's twins, Michael and Gabriel, they look exactly like Tommy and Tyler. I don't mean similar like how lots of kids might look alike. I mean exactly the same. Same faces, same hair, same everything, even the same little scar that Tyler has on his chin from when he fell off his bike." Rosa felt her blood begin to turn cold as the implications of what Emma was saying started to sink in. "Emma, are you absolutely certain about what you're telling me? This is very serious." "Yes, I'm sure. But there's something else, something that made me really scared." Emma's voice became even quieter. "Yesterday, when we were walking past Mrs. Johnson's house on the way to the store, I heard her talking to her friend Mrs. Patterson on the front porch. She was crying really hard, Abuela. She was saying that someone took her boys from Volunteer Park 3 months ago while she was talking to another mom, and the police still haven't found them." Rosa felt the world tilt around her as Emma's words hit her with full force. "Emma, are you absolutely certain about what you heard, every single word?" "Yes, and Abuela, Mrs. Johnson said the boys were 13 months old when they were taken. That's exactly the same age Sophia told me Michael and Gabriel are. Don't you think that's too much of a coincidence?" Across town, Marcus Wellington was preparing for what might be the most important meeting of his life. Detective Liu had called an emergency session at the police station downtown, and David Chen looked grimmer than Marcus had ever seen him. They sat in David's car outside the imposing brick building that housed Seattle's police headquarters, neither man eager to walk through those doors and face whatever revelation awaited them. "Marcus, before we go in there, I need you to understand something crucial. If our suspicions about Sophia Rodriguez are correct, she isn't just a fraud trying to steal money from you. She might be involved in something much worse, something that could destroy lives." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Worse how? What could be worse than fabricating an entire case to steal nearly $1 billion? David's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. The detective got a call this morning from a very unexpected source. A 7-year-old girl named Emma Martinez called the police tip line. Her grandmother had to translate some of it from Spanish, but Marcus, this little girl, thinks she's positively identified the twins. Marcus felt the world tilt dangerously. Identified them as what? What are you not telling me? As 2 missing children who were kidnapped from Volunteer Park 3 months ago. The original parents, Tom and Alice Johnson, have been searching desperately for their twins, Tommy and Tyler, since June. They've had the FBI involved, private investigators, media coverage, everything. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow, knocking the breath from his lungs. "You're telling me Sophia didn't just fabricate a lawsuit against me. She kidnapped children. She's been using stolen children as weapons in a legal case? David nodded grimly. That's exactly what we need to find out. And Marcus, if this 7-year-old is right, then everything changes completely. This isn't about money anymore, or even your reputation. This is about bringing 2 stolen children home to their real parents and putting the people responsible for this horror behind bars. As they walked into the police station, Marcus realized that his fight for financial survival had transformed into something much more profound. A fight for justice and the safety of 2 innocent children who had been pawns in someone else's elaborate and twisted game. The truth was finally beginning to surface, and it would shake the foundation of everything everyone thought they knew about the case that had captivated Seattle. But the most shocking revelation was still to come, and it would come from the most unexpected source, a brave little girl who refused to stay silent when children were in danger. Detective Sarah Liu's office felt smaller than it actually was, crowded with case files, evidence boards, and the weight of a revelation that would change everything. Marcus Wellington sat across from her desk, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles had gone white. David Chen paced behind him, unable to sit still as the full scope of the conspiracy began to unfold. "Mr. Wellington, I need you to understand the gravity of what we're dealing with," Detective Liu said, pulling up photographs on her computer screen. "These are Tom and Alice Johnson. Their twins, Tommy and Tyler, were taken from Volunteer Park on June 15th, while Alice was momentarily distracted by another parent asking for directions." Marcus stared at the photos of a couple roughly his age, their faces etched with months of grief and desperate hope. The resemblance between the children in the family photos and the twins he'd seen in court was unmistakable. My God, they're the same children. "We're coordinating with the FBI's Missing Children Unit now. This case has gone federal." Detective Liu's expression was grim. "Mr. Wellington, we need your complete cooperation. If Sophia Rodriguez is involved in child trafficking, everyone connected to your case is now under scrutiny." David stopped pacing. "What do you need from us?" "Everything. Every document, every conversation, every detail about how this lawsuit started. Because whoever orchestrated this didn't just steal your money. They stole 2 children to do it." Meanwhile, Emma Martinez stood in her grandmother's kitchen, watching Rosa make hurried phone calls in rapid Spanish. The urgency in her grandmother's voice made Emma's stomach twist with anxiety. She understood enough to know they were talking about the police, about children, about something very serious. "Mija," Rosa said after hanging up, kneeling down to Emma's eye level, "you were very brave to tell me what you noticed. The police want to talk to you, but I'll be right there with you, okay?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Are Tommy and Tyler really missing, Abuela? Are they really the same boys living with Sophia?" Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "I think so, Pequeña. And if you're right, you might be the one who brings them home to their real parents." At the same time, in her apartment, Sophia Rodriguez was making the most difficult phone call of her life. Her hands shook as she dialed the number for the Seattle Police Department, knowing that everything would change the moment she spoke. "I need to report. I need to confess to something," she whispered into the phone. "My name is Sophia Rodriguez, but that's not my real name, and the children I have, they're not mine." Across town, Amanda Pierce was in her law office when her secure phone rang. The voice on the other end was cold, controlled, and furious. "There's a problem, Amanda. The police are asking questions about missing children. Fix this, now." Amanda's blood ran cold. "I can handle Sophia. She won't talk. She already is talking. Our contact at the police department says she called in a confession 20 minutes ago. You have 6 hours to clean this up before we clean it up ourselves." The line went dead, leaving Amanda staring at her phone in terror. The people she worked for didn't make idle threats, and Sophia Rodriguez had just signed her own death warrant. The carefully constructed web of lies was beginning to unravel, and everyone caught in it was about to face the consequences of their choices. The FBI field office in Seattle buzzed with activity as Agent Rebecca Foster coordinated the most complex case of her 15-year career. Missing children cases were always high priority, but this one involved federal crimes across multiple jurisdictions, financial fraud in the hundreds of millions, and a conspiracy that reached into places she was still trying to understand. "We have confirmation," she announced to the task force assembled in Conference Room B. "The children currently in Sophia Rodriguez's custody are definitively Tommy and Tyler Johnson, kidnapped 3 months ago from Volunteer Park." Detective Liu nodded grimly. "Sophia called in a confession 2 hours ago. She's agreed to full cooperation in exchange for protective custody. She's terrified of the people who put her up to this." Ndumu, Marcus Wellington, sat in the corner, still trying to process how his life had been destroyed by people using stolen children as weapons. "What exactly did she tell you?" Agent Foster consulted her notes. "Sophia's real name is Maria Santos. She's from El Paso, Texas. 3 years ago, she was working as a nanny for a wealthy family in Chicago when she witnessed something she shouldn't have. A meeting between her employers and some very dangerous people involving money laundering and human trafficking." David Chen leaned forward. "So she was a witness they needed to silence?" "Initially, yes. But then someone realized she could be more useful as an asset. They gave her a new identity, moved her to Seattle, and spent 2 years preparing her for this operation. The goal wasn't just to destroy Marcus Wellington financially. It was to create a legal precedent that would make it easier for them to win similar cases in the future." The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Marcus felt sick thinking about the Johnsons, desperately searching for their children while those same children were being used to destroy his life. Meanwhile, in a safe house across town, Sophia, Maria, sat across from Agent Foster, her whole body shaking as she finally told the truth after 2 years of living a lie. "They told me the children belonged to a woman who had died, that they needed a temporary guardian," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I believed them at first. I wanted to believe them because I loved those babies so much." "When did you realize they were lying?" "About 6 weeks ago, when I saw a missing children poster with their faces on it. That's when I knew I had become part of something horrible." Maria's voice broke. "I tried to back out, but Amanda Pierce. She told me what would happen if I didn't follow through." Agent Foster studied the terrified woman across from her. "What exactly did she threaten?" "She said they knew where my real family was in El Paso. My mother, my sister, my nephew. She showed me pictures of them going to work, going to school. She said accidents happen every day." The agent's expression hardened. "Maria, we're going to protect you and your family, but I need you to tell me everything about Amanda Pierce and the people she works for." As Maria began to speak, revealing names and connections that reached into some of Seattle's most powerful law firms and business circles, Agent Foster realized they weren't just dealing with a kidnapping case. They were unraveling a criminal enterprise that had been operating for years. Outside the safe house, black SUVs with tinted windows had been circling the block for the past hour. Amanda Pierce's employers were running out of patience, and loose ends were about to be tied up permanently. The Johnson family home in Ballard felt like a shrine to hope and grief. Every surface displayed photos of Tommy and Tyler, first steps, first birthdays, family vacations that now seemed like memories from another lifetime. Alice Johnson sat on the couch, clutching a worn teddy bear that smelled faintly of baby powder, while her husband Tom paced by the window. "The FBI agent said they're sure it's our boys," Alice whispered, her voice hoarse from months of crying. "After all this time, someone finally saw them. A 7-year-old girl." Tom stopped pacing and knelt beside his wife. "Agent Foster says we might have them home tonight. Tonight, Alice. Our babies are coming home." But even as hope bloomed in their hearts, both parents were terrified. What had their children endured? Would Tommy and Tyler even remember them? At 13 months old, 3 months of separation was an eternity in a toddler's world. Across town, Marcus Wellington stood in the police station lobby, watching through reinforced glass as Sophia, Maria, was led to a secure vehicle. She looked so small, so broken, nothing like the confident woman who had nearly destroyed his life in court. "Mr. Wellington," Agent Foster approached him, "I know this has been incredibly difficult for you, but I need you to understand something important. Maria Santos is as much a victim in this as you are. The people who used her have done this before, and they'll do it again unless we stop them." Marcus nodded, though forgiveness felt impossible right now. "What about Amanda Pierce? She disappeared 6 hours ago. Her office is empty, her apartment abandoned, but we'll find her." Agent Foster's expression was determined. "And when we do, she's going to answer for every crime she's committed." What Marcus didn't know was that Amanda Pierce wasn't running. She was preparing for one final, desperate play. In a warehouse on the outskirts of Seattle, she met with 2 men whose faces belonged in nightmares. "The Santos woman has talked," she told them. "She knows everything, names, locations, financial routes. We have maybe 12 hours before the FBI starts making arrests." The taller man, whose voice carried a slight Russian accent, studied Amanda with cold calculation. "Then we eliminate the problem at its source." "You mean Maria?" "I mean everyone, the woman, the children, the FBI agents protecting them. Clean slate." Amanda felt her blood freeze. "The children are just babies. Innocent babies." The man's smile was colder than Arctic wind. "There are no innocent people in this business, Amanda. Only survivors and casualties. Which do you want to be?" Meanwhile, Emma Martinez sat in the police station's family interview room, a child psychologist on one side and her grandmother on the other. Agent Foster knelt down to Emma's eye level, speaking gently. "Emma, you've been incredibly brave. Because of you, Tommy and Tyler are going to go home to their real parents tonight." Emma's eyes were wide and serious. "Are they going to be okay? They looked sad when I saw them with Sophia." "They're going to be fine," Agent Foster assured her. "And their parents want to meet you someday, to thank you for bringing their boys home." What none of them knew was that at that very moment, men with guns were moving through the city, determined to make sure there would be no reunion, no justice, and no witnesses left to tell the tale. The final confrontation was coming, and not everyone would survive it. The safe house erupted in chaos at 11:47 p.m. when the first window exploded inward. Agent Rebecca Foster threw herself over Maria Santos as armed men in tactical gear poured through the shattered opening. The FBI protective detail returned fire, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. "Get her to the panic room!" Foster shouted to Agent Martinez as bullets shredded the furniture around them. But it was too late. Maria Santos crumpled to the floor, blood spreading across her chest as she whispered with her dying breath, "The children. Save the children." Across the city, Marcus Wellington was jolted awake by his phone ringing. David Chen's voice was tight with panic. "Marcus, get out of your apartment now. Agent Foster just called. They're coming for everyone connected to the case." Marcus threw on clothes and grabbed his car keys, his mind racing. Where are the Johnson twins? Are they safe? I don't know. The safe house was attacked. Maria Santos is dead. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Whatever else Maria had done, she'd been trying to protect those children at the end. And now the people who had orchestrated this entire nightmare were tying up loose ends with bullets. Meanwhile, in the FBI field office, Agent Foster was coordinating the largest manhunt in Seattle's recent history. Her protective detail had been decimated. Maria Santos was dead, and somewhere in the city, 2 innocent children were still in danger. "Status report on the Johnson twins," she barked into her radio. "Safe House 7 was compromised 20 minutes ago," came the crackling reply. "Unknown number of hostiles. We lost contact with the protection detail." Foster's blood ran cold. The children had been moved to a secondary location when the first safe house was attacked, but if these people had found Maria, they could find anyone. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Pier 47. Come alone, or the children die. You have 30 minutes. Foster stared at the message, knowing it was a trap, but also knowing she had no choice. Tommy and Tyler Johnson were 13-month-old babies who had already endured 3 months of hell. She wouldn't let them die because she was afraid. At Pier 47, the abandoned warehouse smelled of salt water and decay. Amanda Pierce stood in the shadows, no longer the polished lawyer, but a desperate woman who had lost control of forces beyond her understanding. "Agent Foster," she called out as Rebecca entered the cavernous space. "You came." "I wasn't sure you would. Where are the children, Amanda? Safe for now?" Amanda stepped into the light, and Foster could see the fear in her eyes. "I never wanted any of this to happen. It was supposed to be simple. Discredit Marcus Wellington, win the case, take the money. Nobody was supposed to get hurt. But children did get hurt. Tommy and Tyler Johnson have been traumatized, separated from their parents, used as pawns in your scheme." Amanda's composure cracked. "I know. Don't you think I know that? But the people I work for, they don't accept failure. Maria Santos is dead because she tried to back out. I'll be next if I don't deliver you." Foster kept her voice calm, professional. "It doesn't have to end this way, Amanda. Tell me where the children are and we can protect you." "Nobody can protect me from them." Amanda's laugh was bitter. "But maybe I can still do one right thing." She pulled out her phone and sent a text. 30 seconds later, Foster's radio crackled to life. "Agent Foster, we have the children. They're safe. Repeat, Tommy and Tyler Johnson are secure." Amanda smiled sadly. "I sent the address to your team 20 minutes ago. I was never going to let those babies get hurt." "Then why the meeting? Why bring me here?" Amanda's expression grew resigned. "Because they're here too, and they wanted you." The warehouse lights suddenly blazed to life, revealing armed men positioned around the catwalks above. Foster reached for her weapon, but Amanda grabbed her arm. "Don't. There are too many of them. But Agent Foster." "I planted evidence in my office computer before I left. Everything you need to bring down their entire operation. Bank accounts, names, locations, everything." The sound of approaching helicopters filled the air, growing louder by the second. Amanda looked up with something approaching relief. "Looks like your backup arrived faster than they expected." The final battle for justice was about to begin. The FBI tactical team rappelled through the warehouse skylights like avenging angels, their entry coordinated with precision that caught Amanda Pierce's employers completely off guard. The gunfight that followed was brief but intense, muzzle flashes lighting up the cavernous space like deadly fireworks. Agent Foster pulled Amanda behind a concrete pillar as bullets sparked off metal beams above their heads. "How many of them are there?" 8, maybe 10, Amanda gasped, her designer clothes torn and dirty. "But they're not the real power. The man you want is Victor Kozlov. He's been running trafficking operations up and down the West Coast for years." "Where is he now?" "Probably on his yacht, getting ready to disappear into international waters." Amanda pulled out her phone and showed Foster a tracking app. "But I've been monitoring his movements for months. He's still in Elliott Bay." The gunfire suddenly stopped, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the distant sound of sirens. Agent Foster's radio crackled. "All hostiles down. Warehouse secure." Across the city, At Swedish Medical Center, Tommy and Tyler Johnson were reunited with their parents in a scene that brought tears to the eyes of every medical professional present. The twins, though confused and frightened, seemed to recognize their parents' voices and scents. Alice Johnson sobbed as she held her babies for the first time in 3 months. "They're smaller than I remember," she whispered to Tom, who couldn't stop touching their faces, reassuring himself that his sons were real and safe. Dr. Patricia Chen, the hospital's chief pediatrician, smiled gently. "Children are remarkably resilient, Mrs. Johnson. With love and stability, they'll recover from this trauma. The important thing is they're home." Meanwhile, Marcus Wellington stood in his destroyed penthouse apartment, looking at the shattered windows and bullet holes that had turned his sanctuary into a war zone. The people hunting him had found his address, but the FBI had found them first. His phone rang. Agent Foster. "Mr. Wellington, it's over. Amanda Pierce is in custody, and we're coordinating with the Coast Guard to apprehend Viktor Kozlov before he reaches international waters." Marcus sank into his desk chair, exhaustion hitting him like a physical weight. "What about the money? The damages I'm supposed to pay?" "The court order will be vacated immediately. The case was built on fraud, kidnapping, and identity theft. You won't owe a penny." For the first time in months, Marcus felt like he could breathe. His company, his reputation, his future, all of it could be rebuilt. But the cost had been enormous. Maria Santos was dead. 2 innocent children had been traumatized, and a family had endured months of agony. At the police station, 7-year-old Emma Martinez sat with her grandmother, waiting to give her final statement. Detective Liu knelt down beside her chair. "Emma, because of your bravery, Tommy and Tyler are back with their real parents. You're a hero." Emma considered this seriously, then shook her head. "I'm not a hero. I just told the truth when I saw something wrong. My abuela taught me that's what good people do." Rosa Martinez hugged her granddaughter tightly, tears of pride streaming down her weathered cheeks. This brave little girl had saved 2 children and brought down a criminal empire simply by refusing to stay silent when she witnessed injustice. In Elliott Bay, Coast Guard cutters surrounded Viktor Kozlov's 100-foot yacht as FBI agents prepared to board. Kozlov, a man who had built an empire on human suffering, stood on his deck watching his freedom disappear over the horizon. "Viktor Kozlov," Agent Foster's voice came over the loudspeaker. "This is the FBI. You're under arrest for human trafficking, kidnapping, fraud, and murder. Surrender immediately." Kozlov smiled coldly and reached into his jacket. He would not be taken alive to face justice for his crimes. But before he could draw his weapon, FBI snipers ended his reign of terror with precision shots that echoed across the dark water. The nightmare was finally over. Justice had been served, and 2 innocent children were home where they belonged. 6 months later, Seattle had healed from the wounds of the Wellington case, but the scars remained visible to those who knew where to look. The legal reforms that followed had made it much harder for criminals to exploit the court system, and the FBI's takedown of the Kozlov organization had disrupted trafficking networks across the entire Pacific Northwest. Marcus Wellington stood in his rebuilt office, looking out at Elliott Bay, where Viktor Kozlov's yacht had been seized as evidence. His company had not only survived the crisis, but emerged stronger, with new security protocols and a renewed commitment to protecting his employees. The board had unanimously voted to establish the Maria Santos Foundation, providing legal aid to trafficking victims. "Mr. Wellington." His assistant knocked on the door. "The Johnson family is here for your lunch appointment." Marcus straightened his tie and walked to the conference room where Tom and Alice Johnson waited with their twins. Tommy and Tyler, now 19 months old, toddled around the room with the boundless energy of healthy children. The trauma of their kidnapping had faded, replaced by the security of being loved and protected. "Tom, Alice," Marcus stood and shook their hands warmly. "Thank you for coming. How are the boys doing?" Alice beamed as she watched Tommy stack blocks while Tyler played with a toy truck. They're amazing. Dr. Chen says they've made a complete recovery. Children really are more resilient than we give them credit for. I wanted to thank you both, Marcus said. I know my legal troubles seem insignificant compared to what you went through, but your children's case exposed a criminal network that was destroying lives. You helped bring justice not just for yourselves, but for other families. Tom nodded gravely. Agent Foster told us about Maria Santos, how she tried to protect the boys at the end. We don't hate her. She was a victim too. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Emma Martinez peeked in, now 8 years old, and still possessed of the same clear-eyed wisdom that had saved 2 children's lives. Hi, Mr. Wellington. Abuela is downstairs talking to your security guard about our visit. Marcus smiled and knelt down to Emma's level. Emma, I can never thank you enough for what you did, because you spoke up when you saw something wrong. Tommy and Tyler are here with their real parents. Emma studied the twins seriously, then nodded with satisfaction. They look happy now. That's what matters. Alice Johnson approached Emma with tears in her eyes. Sweetie, would you like to meet Tommy and Tyler properly? They're the boys you helped bring home. Emma's face lit up as she was introduced to the toddlers who giggled and reached for her hands. Hi, Tommy. Hi, Tyler. I'm Emma. I'm the one who told everyone you belonged with your real mommy and daddy. As the adults watched Emma play with the twins, Marcus felt a profound sense of completion. The case had cost him millions in legal fees and security measures, had nearly destroyed his company, and had put his life at risk. But seeing this little girl laugh with the children she had saved made every moment of suffering worthwhile. Agent Rebecca Foster entered the room, now wearing civilian clothes after accepting a position as Marcus's Director of Corporate Security. Sorry I'm late. The sentencing hearing for Amanda Pierce just concluded. What did she get? Tom asked. 25 years for her role in the conspiracy. She cooperated fully with our investigation, which helped us dismantle the rest of Kozlov's network. Foster's expression was satisfied. Justice has been served. As the gathering continued, Rosa Martinez arrived to collect her granddaughter. The elderly woman looked around the room at the reunited family, the successful businessman who had survived an attempt to destroy him, and the FBI agent who had brought criminals to justice. Mija, she said to Emma in Spanish, are you ready to go home? Emma hugged Tommy and Tyler goodbye, then looked up at all the adults surrounding her. Abuela always taught me that when good people work together, they can fix anything that bad people break. I think she was right. As the Johnson family left with their children, and Rosa and Emma headed home to their modest apartment, Marcus stood alone in his office, reflecting on the lesson a 7-year-old girl had taught them all. Truth, no matter how small or quiet the voice that speaks it, will always triumph over lies. Justice, no matter how long delayed, will always find its way. And sometimes the most powerful force for change in the world is simply a child, brave enough to say what they see, even when the adults around them have forgotten how to look. The Wellington case was closed, but the legacy of Emma Martinez's courage would inspire others to speak truth to power for years to come. In a world where corruption and deceit seemed to hold all the advantages, one little girl had proven that integrity and bravery could still change everything. The truth had set them all free,